Hi, Larry here, WD0AKX, and I want to do a short video just explaining how I got started in radio, in my radio hobbies, radio listening, and ham radio. And I think it's the same as many of you out there I talked to on the air got started the same way. And but if not, maybe we can all leave a message in the comments and share your story on how you got started, how you became interested in whatever kind of radio you're into, radio broadcasting or shortwave listening, CB, ham, whatever. But I started in 1971 or so. I got this transistor radio for Christmas from my parents, and it still works, believe it or not. But I used to take this to bed at night and listen under my pillow and listen to the faraway AM radio rock and roll stations, the store stations like WHB, WDGY, and KAAY, and those kind of stations. And that's how I began listening to radio, and I could hear faraway places on this little box. And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. There's got to be more out there, and how can I hear stations so far away? So that takes me to the next chapter here. And I was 7 years old then, by the way. And then I went to my local Montgomery Ward store and was looking at the radios. And I purchased this multi-band portable radio, which had the shortwave radio band on it, which was a mystery to me at the time. But I tuned up and down that band, and I heard so many interesting signals and stations out there that I was hooked. So I had to find out more. And also, it had the VHF air band and police band, which covered the 2-meter ham band. And I tuned across that area of the dial, and I would hear these guys talking, and they were just chatting about regular things going on. And I thought, what is this? How do they talk on there? What kind of radios do they have? And I didn't know a thing about ham radio yet. So, and at the same time, my dad was into a farming business operation, and we had this in our house, an old Johnny 1, E.F. Johnson Johnny 1 CB base station, and they had the mobile radios in their pickups and farm equipment at the time. This was the early 1970s. Later they upgraded to an FM repeater. But at the time, there was a lot of skip coming in, and I was hearing firefighters out in California, and we lived in Minnesota. And I thought, wow, how am I hearing this? How am I hearing people in California fighting fires, firemen out there using CB radios at the time? So that was very interesting. And my dad told me this was strictly for business. At the time, I didn't know about hobby radio or CB hobby radio. So I treated it as that, and I would only use it when he called home or something I might answer. But I thought, this is strictly business here at the time. So then, I guess it was maybe 2 or 3 years later, something like that. This was all in the early 1970s, and now around 1974 or 5 maybe, I saw this in the OK Hardware store in our small town, a walkie-talkie, and I wanted to try one. I thought, I want to get a couple of walkie-talkies to play around with, and I ended up meeting some local kids in my town that I lived in. And they had CB walkie-talkies. They were common at the time, especially with the kids. And I ran into them on the air and started chatting with them. And we met up. We were riding bikes around town. And we started kind of a, not a club, but a little thing where we all used our radios on our bikes. And we had to keep going up from there, of course. This radio is a General Electric. It was the super regenerative receiver type, so you turn it on and it was a lot of static all the time. You'd hear the whole CB band, and the noise was annoying. So I went to Radio Shack and I upgraded because my other friends already had updated radios, the super heterodyne receivers that were quiet, and that made a world of difference, and they had better range. So this was my next radio, a realistic walkie-talkie. And after that, we kept going to compete, of course, and I ended up buying this high-power 4-watt output CB 23 channel. That's what they were at the time until 1977. And I got on the air with this, and I really shocked them. They said I had a strong signal, so that was a lot of fun. So we kept the competition going and ended up getting CB base stations and base station antennas and put radios in our parents' car. And then that was about the time the CB craze really was kicking in. So that became really popular, and we did a lot with that at the time. And I became kind of the local town radio expert, I guess, and I installed CB radios in people's cars and things like that, and they were sent over to my place and said, "Can you put a radio in for us?" And yeah, sure, okay. So I made a little extra money doing that. It was a lot of fun. But then my dad told me about a guy he knew that was into something a little different than CB. Thought it was maybe ham radio or something, and he gave him a call and asked if I could come out and visit him some afternoon, which I did, and he became my Elmer in ham radio. His call is WA0YGE, Ted. He ended up giving me these two books, but first, when I went to visit, he had some Drake equipment downstairs in his basement, and he got on the air, made a contact with someone in Texas, and the thing that did it for me, he put me on the microphone to say hello to this guy, and the guy replied saying hi back, and I thought, that was it. I got to get into this hobby. So he told me all about it, and he brought me over a couple of books here, the license manual and how to become a radio amateur. And that was in 1976. Now I need to mention the scanner sitting here, a Bearcat 101, which was one of the first programmable scanners, I believe in 1975 or so. Shortly after I had this for a little while, we got a scanner that was becoming popular at the time from my Montgomery Ward store, and they had a whole bunch of scanners on their shelves, and my dad was kind of interested also. So we brought this home. Didn't have to buy crystals for it, just program it up, and I also got to listen to some local ham radio 2-meter activity when I found out a little more about that. So that made it even more interesting. So to make a long story short, me and my buddies went on to pass our novice class ham tickets in early of 1977. I was 13, just turned 13, and they were about the same age, maybe a couple years older. And I'm still into radio to this day. Never let it go. Having a lot of fun with it. And the thing is, a lot of people say you have your cell phone these days. Why do you need ham radio? Well, you can't just grab your phone and dial somebody at random anywhere in the world and have a random chat about something with a similar interest as you. Well, you can on the radio. You can get on the air, and it's like they say, it's kind of like fishing. You get on the air and you never know what you're going to catch. And that's the truth. I've made so many nice friends over the years and still make new friends all the time through radio. So I'm still active in several different facets of ham radio and other types of radio also. I like voice modes on HF and digital. I like working through satellites and occasionally making a contact with the International Space Station. So that's some of the things I like to do. This was my first HF rig in 1977, a Drake TR4CW. And another important thing with radio is the public service side of it, and in times of natural disasters, sometimes your cell phone networks go down and it's really hard to communicate by phone. But radios are still there and generally put in use anytime there's some kind of a natural disaster going on. You'll see especially ham radio being used to provide communications. So that's something else to keep in mind. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm still accumulating equipment to this day, of course. You can see my shack looks a lot different these days than it used to. But that's normal with any hobby, I guess. It just keeps building for you. So if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, and again, leave comments below on how you got started in radio. Thanks for watching, and 7-3 from Radio Ham Guy on YouTube.